The first thing I saw wasn't the old farmhouse. It was the sign. Property under HOA management. Bright white. Fresh paint. Screwed straight into the wooden post my grandfather had carved with his own hands. I stood there frozen, the gravel crunching under my boots as two pickup trucks idled near the barn. Men in branded vests walked my land like they owned it, measuring, pointing, laughing. Then she stepped forward. Karen. Perfect hair. Clipboard tucked against her chest. A smile that wasn't warm, just sharp. "You can't be here," she said loudly, making sure the neighbors heard. "This property has been abandoned for years." I told her my name. Told her this was my family's farm. She didn't even blink. "Your family left this place to rot," she replied. "The HOA stepped in to protect the community." Protect. I looked past her, at the fence line my grandpa and I built together. At the fields where he taught me how to work with my hands, not beg with them. At the house that held every memory of the man who raised me when no one else would. Karen followed my eyes and laughed. "Sentimental stories don't change the law," she said. "You don't belong here anymore." Phones came out. Whispers followed. A calm black man standing on land he grew up on, being told to leave like a trespasser. She pointed toward the road. "If you don't go now, I'll have you removed." I felt the weight of every stare. Every assumption. Karen thought this farm was forgotten. She thought my grandfather's legacy had no voice. What she didn't know was that I wasn't here to argue. I was here to take it back. Before we go any further, take a moment and drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. And if you believe land, legacy, and dignity should never be stolen by power or paperwork, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories like this matter. Make sure you subscribe to Better Tomorrow, because this channel exists for moments when injustice looks confident, right before it collapses. That farm wasn't just land to me. It was where I learned how to stand straight, how to work without complaining, and how to keep my word even when no one was watching. My grandfather raised me there after my parents left town chasing lives that never quite worked out. He never talked much, but everything he taught me was done with his hands, fixing fences, tending soil, repairing what others gave up on. When he passed, the family came back just long enough to argue. They walked through the house like strangers, calling the farm a burden. Too far from the city. Too much work. Too little value. Within weeks, they were gone again, and the land was left behind, quiet and unattended. Life pulled me away too. Work. Survival. Responsibility. I promised myself I'd return soon, but time slipped the way it always does. Grass grew tall. Paint peeled. Silence settled in. From the outside, the farm probably looked abandoned. But abandonment isn't the same as surrender. What no one asked was who still held the deed. Who paid the taxes? Who my grandfather trusted enough to protect what he built? There were papers locked away, decisions made long before his death, things he'd prepared for quietly, the way he did everything else. So when people say my family left the farm to rot, they're not wrong. But when they say it was no longer ours, that's where the story changes. Because some legacies don't disappear just because the world stops paying attention. It didn't take long for someone like Karen to notice the farm. In her world, order wasn't about community, it was about control. Trimmed lawns. Matching mailboxes. Streets that looked perfect from the outside, even if the people living there felt anything but free. As president of the HOA, Karen had built a reputation for cleaning things up. What that really meant was pushing boundaries until no one dared to question her. The farm stood out immediately. Tall grass. A quiet house. No cars in the driveway. To Karen, it wasn't a legacy, it was an opportunity. She started with paperwork. Notices were sent to an old address. Fines stacked up for violations no one had been warned about. Unmaintained property. Community standards breach. each letter more confident than the last. Each one written with the assumption that no one would respond. Then came the walkthroughs. HOA members in reflective vests began appearing at the fence line, clipboards in hand, taking photos like tourists in someone else's memory. They measured boundaries they didn't own and spoke openly about future plans, community gardens, shared spaces, even resale value. Karen made sure the neighbors heard her. "It's a shame," she'd say loudly, standing where the porch used to feel safe. "But abandoned properties bring down everyone's value. We're just stepping in." Stepping in quickly turned into stepping over. A temporary sign went up. Then another. Contractors were contacted. Gravel was dumped near the entrance, as if claiming the land through presence alone. No court order. No legal transfer. Just confidence. Confidence works when no one pushes back. Karen convinced herself the story was finished. That whoever owned the farm had moved on, died, or didn't matter enough to fight. She talked about the land like it already belonged to the HOA, like the decision had been made the moment she noticed it. What she didn't realize was that power built on assumptions is fragile. Because the moment I stepped back onto that soil, her carefully constructed narrative began to crack, even if she didn't see it yet. And the closer she moved toward claiming what wasn't hers, the harder the fall was going to be. By the time I came back to the farm, Karen had made herself comfortable. The gate was wide open. HOA trucks were parked near the barn, their logos splashed across the doors like badges of authority. Two men leaned against the fence, talking about timelines and budgets, as if the land beneath their feet was already theirs. I walked in anyway. The conversation stopped the moment they noticed me. Karen turned slowly, that same tight smile fixed in place. "Excuse me," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "this is an active HOA-managed site." I told her I was there to check on my property. She laughed. Not a surprised laugh. Not a confused one. The kind that assumes the outcome before the conversation even begins. "Sir," she said, glancing at her clipboard, "we've been through this. This land was abandoned. You can't just walk in and claim it." I asked her how she decided it was abandoned. She waved her hand toward the house. "Look at it. Overgrown. Falling apart. No response to notices. That tells us everything." I noticed neighbors gathering at the edge of the road. Phones came out. Curiosity always follows confrontation. I told Karen my grandfather's name. She didn't recognize it, or pretended not to. "Stories don't equal ownership," she replied. "If you had a right to be here, you would have shown up sooner." There it was. The assumption that absence meant failure. That a quiet black man standing alone couldn't possibly have the authority he claimed. I asked her one simple question. "Can you show me the deed that gives the HOA control of this land?" She stared at me for a second, then smiled wider. "We don't owe trespassers our documents," she said. "Security?" One of the men straightened up, hand resting on his belt like he'd been waiting for permission. Karen folded her arms. "You have two choices," she continued. "Leave peacefully, or we escalate this." Escalate. The word hung in the air, heavy with threat. Neighbors whispered. Someone zoomed their camera closer. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. Karen's tone shifted. "You people always think emotion can override the rules," she snapped. "This neighborhood has standards." I felt every eye on me. Waiting for anger. Waiting for proof of whatever stereotype fit their comfort. Instead, I stood still. I looked at the porch steps my grandfather built. The barn door he fixed after every storm. The fence line where he once told me, "They'll try to take what you don't defend." Karen mistook my silence for weakness. She stepped closer. "I'm calling this in," she said. "You're trespassing on HOA-controlled land." She turned away, already dialing, already confident. Already enjoying the performance of authority. That's when I spoke again, calm, clear, and loud enough for everyone to hear. Call whoever you want, I said. But make sure they bring the real paperwork. She paused. Just for a second. Not long enough to admit doubt, but long enough to prove it had entered her mind. Karen turned back, jaw tight. You're making a mistake, she said. People like you always do. That's when I realized this wasn't just about land. It was about humiliation. About putting someone in their place in front of an audience. About showing who held power and who was supposed to shrink. What Karen didn't understand was that I wasn't here to raise my voice. I was here to let the truth speak for itself. And the truth doesn't need permission. After Karen threatened to escalate, everyone expected something dramatic. A shout. A protest. A scene loud enough to justify whatever came next. Instead, I did nothing. I stepped back a few feet and let the noise die on its own. The men by the barn exchanged confused looks. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to keep recording or put their phones away. Silence has a way of unsettling people who rely on authority to speak for them. Karen watched me closely. She was waiting for anger. For frustration. For anything she could label as disorder. When it didn't come, she filled the space herself. You see, she said to the small crowd forming along the road. This is exactly why HOAs exist. People disappear for years, then come back demanding exceptions. She spoke like a teacher scolding a child, her voice polished and practiced. Every word was meant to frame me as irresponsible, as someone who had forfeited his rights by simply not being present enough. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. Not to argue. Not to record her. To make a call. Karen smirked. Calling a lawyer won't change anything, she said. We've already documented the abandonment. I didn't respond. I walked over to the hood of my truck, leaned against it, and waited while the call rang. That's when the memories came back. My grandfather sitting at the kitchen table late at night, sorting papers into neat stacks. Deeds. Tax receipts. Letters from the county. I used to ask why he kept everything so carefully. Because one day, he'd say, someone will tell you this isn't yours. And you'll need more than memories to prove them wrong. The call connected. I spoke quietly, giving an address, a name, and a simple request. No drama. No explanation needed. Karen noticed the shift immediately. Who are you calling? She demanded. I looked up. Someone who actually has authority here. That's when her confidence began to thin. She motioned to one of the HOA men. Start marking the fence line, she ordered, louder than necessary. We're moving forward. The man hesitated. Shouldn't we wait? I said move, she snapped. As if to prove her control, she walked toward the edge of the property and pointed where she wanted the new boundary to be drawn. She talked about permits and bylaws, throwing out legal-sounding phrases like shields. But something was off. A black sedan pulled up near the road and parked without ceremony. No HOA logo. No clipboard. Just a county seal on the door. The conversation stopped. A man stepped out, followed by a woman carrying a folder thick with documents. They didn't rush. They didn't raise their voices. They walked with the quiet certainty of people who didn't need to perform power. Karen turned pale. She approached them quickly, smile returning in fragments. Hi there. This is a private HOA matter. The woman raised a hand. We're here regarding a complaint about unauthorized land management. Karen laughed nervously. There must be some confusion. There is, the man replied. But not on our end. He opened the folder and began reading. The farm was listed under a trust. Established years ago. Taxes paid in full. No liens. No transfer. No abandonment claim filed or approved. Karen's words started to tangle. She tried to interrupt. Tried to explain. Tried to redirect. The woman closed the folder and looked directly at her. You've placed signage, issued fines, and initiated work on property your HOA does not own, she said. That's a serious violation. The neighbors went silent. Phones rose higher. Karen looked at me then, not with arrogance, not with anger, but with something close to fear. She finally realized what my silence had been. Not surrender. Preparation. Because while she had been talking, assuming, and performing authority, the truth had been on its way. And it never arrives quietly for the people who tried to bury it. The moment the county officials finished speaking, the air changed. What had started as a neighborhood spectacle turned into something heavier, something no amount of confidence could talk its way out of. Karen stood frozen, her clipboard hanging loosely at her side, the authority she wore so comfortably only minutes ago now slipping away in front of everyone she tried to impress. "This can't be right," she said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "We followed procedure. The property met every definition of abandonment." The county woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Abandonment isn't determined by how something looks," she replied. "It's determined by law. And by records." She turned the folder outward so the cameras could see. Dates. Signatures. Seals. The trust had been established before my grandfather passed, designed to protect the land specifically from situations like this. It named a single successor. Me. The paperwork was clear, clean, and undeniable. Karen's jaw tightened. She tried another angle. Even if that's true, the HOA acted in good faith. We were maintaining community standards. The county man stepped forward. Good faith doesn't allow you to fine, enter, or modify private property without consent. Especially not repeatedly. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Neighbors who had nodded along with Karen earlier now avoided her eyes. A few whispered to each other, clearly realizing how close they'd come to supporting something illegal. Karen straightened her shoulders. "If there were mistakes," she said sharply, "they were administrative. Hardly worth this level of response." That's when I spoke again. "For months," I said calmly, "you told people this land was abandoned. You told them the owner didn't care. You told them you had the right to take over." I met her gaze. "You never once asked who still held the deed." Silence followed. The kind that settles in when excuses run out. The county woman turned to Karen. "There's more." She flipped another page. The HOA had issued fines to itself, using an internal account. Contractors had been contacted before any legal approval. Boundaries had been marked outside HOA jurisdiction. "This isn't just overreach," she continued. "It's a pattern." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. A man from the HOA board, someone I hadn't noticed before, stepped forward. "Karen, is this true?" She shot him a look. "This is not the time." "It is," he interrupted. "We trusted you." More board members appeared, drawn by the crowd and the tension. The story was spreading in real time, and Karen could no longer control the narrative. The county man spoke again. "Effective immediately, all HOA activity on this property must cease. Any damage will be documented. An investigation into misuse of authority will follow." The word investigation landed hard. Karen's face drained of color. She tried one last time to reclaim control. "This is being blown out of proportion," she said, voice cracking. "I was protecting the neighborhood." The response came not from an official, but from a neighbor. "You were protecting yourself," the woman said. "You never cared who that land belonged to." Others nodded. Phones kept recording. Karen looked around, realizing too late that the audience she tried to use had turned against her. The HOA board member cleared his throat. "Karen, until this is resolved, you're suspended from your position." Suspended. The word echoed. Her clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the gravel with a dull thud. For the first time since I arrived, Karen had nothing to say. I stepped forward, not in anger, not in triumph, just clarity. This farm was never abandoned, I said. It was protected. You didn't move into an empty space. You walked into a legacy. No one argued. The officials packed up their documents. Contractors backed away. Signs were quietly removed. And Karen stood alone, surrounded by the consequences of every assumption she'd made. Power doesn't always fall with noise. Sometimes it collapses under the weight of the truth it tried to ignore. By the end of the week, the signs were gone. Every post the HOA had planted was pulled from the ground and stacked near the road, waiting to be hauled away. The contractors never came back. The fences Karen ordered were never built. What remained was silence, the kind that feels earned. The county followed through. The HOA was ordered to restore the land to its original condition. Damaged soil was repaired. Equipment marks were smoothed out. Every fine issued was voided. And Karen's administrative mistakes were officially reclassified for what they were: abuse of authority. She resigned before the investigation was finished. No dramatic apology. No final speech. Just a quiet exit from the position she once used so confidently. I stood on the porch a few days later, watching the fields move with the wind the way they always had. The farm didn't look perfect, but it never needed to. It only needed to be respected. I thought about my grandfather. About how he prepared for this without ever knowing it would happen. He understood something most people forget: power looks for weakness, but it fears preparation. The family still hasn't come back. Maybe they never will. But the land didn't need them. It had a voice. And this time, it was heard. So if there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple: silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means someone is gathering the truth. And when truth finally shows up, even the loudest authority learns how fragile it really is.